It was a regular night, the kind where you think nothing's going to change, and you're just moving through the motions of life. But then my brother, my always tough, always in control older brother, pulled me aside and said something that turned my whole world upside down. Something so unexpected, I still haven't been able to wrap my mind around it. I've always thought I knew him. But that night, in the quiet of our childhood home, I learned more about him than I ever expected. Something dark, something real. And let me tell you, what he asked me to do. I could never have imagined it. Keep reading if you want to know what happened next, because trust me, you won't believe what I found out. Hey, before I start, I've got to ask, where are you watching from? Are you curled up somewhere cozy in a quiet little town, maybe near a park or a cafe that's seen better days? Or are you one of those city dwellers, the ones who hear the hum of cars and the buzz of streetlights 24/7? I bet there's a place near you that holds memories, good, bad, or even strange, just like the ones I'm about to share. And maybe, just maybe, you've got a story of your own, one that's tucked away, waiting to be told. But enough about you for now. Let me tell you about that night. It was late, the kind of late where the world outside felt like it was on pause. I just finished a long shift at the cafe, and the house was still. There wasn't the usual sound of my brother's guitar echoing through the halls, or my mom bustling around the kitchen. My parents had gone to bed hours ago, and I was about to settle in with a book. I liked these moments, the silence of the house when everything felt like it was slowing down for the night. It made everything feel a little more personal. Then I heard the creak of the stairs. I looked up to see Donald, my older brother, standing there at the top of the stairs. Donald's always been the cool one. The one everyone turned to for advice, the one who had a girlfriend since forever, and the one who always seemed to have his life figured out. But that night, the look on his face was different. He wasn't smiling, and he wasn't carrying his usual cocky confidence. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, and he stood there, just staring at me. "You busy?" he asked, his voice a little off, like he wasn't sure how to phrase whatever was on his mind. I smiled, trying to read him. "Not at all. What's up? Can we talk?" He didn't wait for my answer. Instead, he started walking toward me, his footsteps heavier than usual, like each one was weighing him down. I closed my book, set it aside, and sat up straight. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual even though I could feel the shift in the air. The last time we'd had a serious conversation, it was about me leaving for college. That was months ago, and I wasn't sure what could be so important now. He sat down beside me on the couch, a little too close, almost like he was afraid I might run away if he didn't. I looked over at him. His face was tense, like he was steeling himself for something. "Betty," he started, and I swear I'd never heard him say my name with that much weight before. "I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens, you won't tell anyone." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of promise?" He hesitated, and for the first time in my life, I saw the cracks in the armor that Donald usually wore so perfectly. I've been going through some stuff. Some things that are hard to talk about," he said, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite read. "And I need to tell you, but you can't tell Mom, or Dad, or anyone else." I leaned back, trying to process. My mind raced, trying to come up with a reason, any reason, why my brother, who had always been the tough guy, would suddenly need me to keep a secret. Donald was the one who never asked for help. He was the one who always gave everyone else advice. And yet, here he was, looking at me like I was his last lifeline. "Okay," I said, my voice small, almost unsure, but I knew I had to listen. "You can tell me." He took a deep breath, running his fingers through his messy hair. "I've been seeing someone. Someone I don't think Mom or Dad would approve of." He paused, his gaze flicking down to the floor before meeting mine again. "And it's not just about that. I've been lying about a lot of things. I've been lying to them for months, and I don't know how to fix it." I felt my stomach knot. Lying about what? He exhaled sharply, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. It was like he didn't know whether to keep talking or just run away from whatever he was about to say. "I'm gay, Betty, And I've known for a while, but I couldn't tell them. I couldn't tell anyone, he admitted, his voice so quiet, it barely reached my ears. I didn't know how they'd react. I didn't know how you would react. I sat there stunned. Donald had always been the person everyone looked to for answers, for stability. I never imagined that underneath all of that, he was carrying something so heavy, something he felt he couldn't share with anyone, even me. You don't have to say anything right now, he said quickly, his voice breaking slightly. I just needed you to know. I need you to promise me. Promise me you won't tell anyone. The words hung in the air, and I just stared at him, feeling the weight of everything he had just said. I knew that whatever happened next, things would never be the same between us. But I also knew that, in some strange way, this was the beginning of something deeper between us. I swallowed, trying to find the right words, but all I could think to say was, I promise, Donald. I won't tell anyone. And that was the first time I realized that the secret wasn't just his. It was mine too. It's strange, you know? How one simple promise can change the way you see someone. Before that night, Donald was just my brother. The guy who always had it together, who I could always count on, even when I didn't need to. But after he sat next to me on the couch and told me that, it felt like the air around us had shifted. It wasn't just about the secret itself. It was about the trust he had placed in me, and the responsibility that came with it. I sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the spot on the couch where he had been. The weight of his words lingered, the silence between us stretching out longer than it should have. I could feel it in my chest. The tightness, the knot that wouldn't loosen. It wasn't just that my brother had been carrying this burden for so long. It was also that he had trusted me with it now, and I wasn't sure if I could hold that kind of responsibility without breaking. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was staring at someone I didn't fully understand, and it scared me. The next few days felt different. The small talk between Donald and me became like walking through a fog. I'd catch myself looking at him, trying to piece together the version of him I had never known. How had he kept this hidden for so long? How did I never notice? We were still going through the motions of family life, me, working at the cafe, Donald, running errands, my parents, stuck in their routine of dinners and TV shows, but underneath it all, something was shifting. There was a distance between us now, even though we didn't speak about it. It wasn't the kind of distance that came from anger or resentment. It was the kind of distance that came from knowing too much, but not knowing how to act on it. I remember one evening, a few days after Donald had shared his secret, I was sitting at the kitchen table, peeling an orange, when he walked in. I'd been trying to shake the unease off, but every time I saw him, the words he'd said kept echoing in my mind. Hey, he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. Hey, I replied, not quite meeting his gaze. It wasn't like I was mad at him, or even uncomfortable, but I didn't know what to say. What could I say? I didn't know how to act like everything was the same when it clearly wasn't. Donald hesitated before walking over to the counter, opening the fridge, and grabbing a bottle of water. The air felt thick, but neither of us spoke for a few moments. Then, in a soft voice, he broke the silence. You're not weirded out, are you? I turned toward him then. He was standing with his back slightly hunched, his fingers wrapped around the neck of the water bottle like it was the only thing holding him up. No, I said quickly, maybe a little too quickly. I'm just trying to understand everything, I guess. He nodded, his face unreadable. Yeah, I get it. It's a lot. I could tell he was waiting for me to say something else, something deeper, but I wasn't sure what to say. What could I say? I wasn't sure if I should start asking questions or if I should just leave things be. I wanted to ask him how long he'd known, how he'd felt all these years, but somehow it didn't seem right. I didn't want to press him too much. He'd already given me so much. I don't know why I didn't tell you sooner, he said, almost to himself. I guess I was just scared. You don't have to explain, I said, my voice quieter now. I'm just glad you told me. His eyes flickered with something, a mixture of relief and maybe even surprise. Like he hadn't expected me to say that. Yeah, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, It's a big deal, Dawn, I said, feeling the words slide out of my mouth before I could stop them. But it's not going to change anything between us. I'm still your sister. He smiled faintly, but I could see the tension in his shoulders start to ease just a little. The lines on his face softened, and for the first time since that night on the couch, I saw a glimpse of the old Donald again. The confident, easygoing brother I'd known my whole life. It was a small thing, but it meant a lot. I hope so, he said, running a hand through his hair. I don't want things to be weird. I nodded. They won't be. We're good. But the truth was, it was weird. Not in the way you'd expect. There was no anger or shame, just a sense of unspoken change. Like we had both crossed an invisible line we couldn't come back from, and it was making us both nervous, unsure of where to go from here. The weeks that followed felt like a slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew about my brother. I couldn't help but notice things about him that I'd never really paid attention to before. The way he dressed, the way he glanced at a guy walking by, the way he became almost more himself when he was around people who made him feel comfortable. It was all so subtle, so quiet, and yet it was all there. He didn't need to say a word. It was as if everything he hadn't been able to say for years was silently slipping out, piece by piece. One afternoon, a couple of weeks after the conversation, we went to the park together. It was just the two of us, and we hadn't done something like that in years. I watched him sit on the swing, pushing himself lightly, looking up at the sky. "You okay?" I asked, standing next to him. "Yeah, just thinking," he said, his voice distant, like he was somewhere else. "You ever wonder if life would be easier if we could just start over?" I frowned, sitting down next to him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, not really looking at me. "Like, if we could just be who we are, without all the expectations, without hiding." I thought about that. It wasn't something I had ever really considered before. Life without the weight of other people's opinions, without feeling like you had to wear a mask every day. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Donald had been carrying a secret for so long. A secret that wasn't just his. It was mine now too. I realized that in some ways I was starting to feel the same weight he'd been feeling all those years. "Maybe it would be easier," I said softly. "But I think we'll be okay, you and me. We got each other, right?" He turned to look at me, and for the first time in a long time, his smile was real. "Yeah, we've got each other." I didn't realize it at first, but once you're holding someone else's secret, especially one as heavy as Donald's, every ordinary moment starts to feel louder. Little things become huge. A passing comment at dinner, a glance exchanged in the hallway, even the way he breathed when he was nervous, everything echoed. And I guess that's why, a few days after our talk in the park, I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. It was a Saturday morning, and the sunlight was sliding through the curtains in soft strips. The house smelled like coffee, my mom's weekend ritual, and the low hum of the dishwasher filled the kitchen. I was leaning against the counter, scrolling through messages on my phone, when Donald came down the stairs, wearing a hoodie I'd never seen before. It was dark green, clean, simple, but it wasn't his. It didn't fit like his clothes usually did, and the sleeves were slightly too long. He must have seen the confusion on my face because the moment our eyes met, he froze, then stuffed his hands into his pockets like he could hide inside the fabric. "You're up early," I said, trying to sound casual. "Couldn't sleep," he muttered. But there was something in the way he said it, like he wasn't telling the whole truth. And for a moment, the old instinct kicked in. Ask questions, poke, prod, dig. But I stopped myself. I'd promised I wouldn't push. I promised I'd give him space. Still, there was something about that hoodie. "May sweater," I tried, softly teasing. He blinked at me, surprised. "Oh yeah, borrowed it." "From who?" There was a pause, long enough that I almost regretted asking at all. But then he glanced over his shoulder, making sure our parents weren't around, and leaned closer. "His name's Evan," he whispered. And just like that, the room felt warmer, like a curtain had lifted and a tiny piece of sunlight slipped in. "Oh," I said quietly. "Is he someone special?" Donald didn't answer right away, but the small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth told me everything I needed to know. I felt this rush of something, happiness for him, but also fear. A fear that if anyone else noticed the smile he was trying so hard to hide, everything might collapse. He wasn't ready. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. "Does he treat you well?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. Donald's smile grew. "Yeah, better than I deserve." I shook my head. "Don't say that. Everyone deserves that kind of care." He looked at me again, really looked, and in his eyes I saw a mixture of relief and something deeper, gratitude, maybe. Like for the first time, he was starting to believe that someone could accept this part of him without question. Before I could say anything else, Mom walked into the kitchen, humming as she carried a stack of folded towels. Donald straightened so fast he almost bumped into the cabinet. His smile vanished, his shoulders tightened. And the soft, warm moment between us evaporated. It happened often over the next few days, the flicker of openness followed by the instinct to hide. And I could see it wearing on him. Secrets don't just sit quietly inside a person. They press, they shape, they exhaust. One night, I found him on the back porch. The air was cool, and the sky was the kind of deep blue that only happens right before midnight. He was sitting on the wooden steps, his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped tightly together. "You okay?" I asked as I stepped outside. He didn't look up, just thinking. "About Ivan?" He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "He wants me to meet his friends. Says they know, says they won't judge." He let out a shaky laugh. Can you imagine? Being myself in front of actual people? I sat beside him. The wood was cold beneath my legs. "That sounds nice." "It does," he whispered, so small I almost didn't hear it. "But I'm scared." We sat there for a moment, listening to the wind rustle through the trees at the edge of the yard. It was the same yard we played in as kids, the yard where we'd built forts, and argued, and chased each other around the old maple tree. Back then, the world felt so simple, so safe. "I wish I could just tell them," he said after a long silence. "Mom and Dad. I wish I didn't have to hide every part of my life." I rested my hand lightly over his. He didn't pull away. "You don't have to tell them until you're ready," I said softly. "And when you are, I'll be there, I promise." He swallowed hard, like the words were a lifeline. "Thank you, Betty." The honesty in his voice tightened something in my chest. I knew this wasn't just a casual moment. This was one of those memories I carry forever, the kind that shapes you in ways you don't realize until much later. The next day, something unexpected happened. We were in the living room, pretending to watch TV, when Donald's phone buzzed. His whole face lit up the second he checked the screen, not a huge grin, but a soft one, gentle enough for me to know exactly who it was. "You can go," I whispered, nudging him with my elbow. "It's fine." "You sure?" "Go." He slipped out of the room, trying to hide his smile, but he wasn't quick enough. I saw it. And it made me smile too. Because it meant he wasn't alone anymore. And that mattered, more than he realized. But later that night, right when the house was settling and the air was cooling and everything felt quiet again, something happened that changed everything. It started with a knock on my bedroom door. A soft one. Almost hesitant. "Betty?" His voice trembled. I sat up immediately. "Yeah, come in." He stepped inside, his face pale, his hands shaking just enough for me to notice. "What's wrong?" I asked, my heart already speeding up. He swallowed, looking at the floor. "Someone saw us," he whispered. And just like that, every quiet, careful moment of the past few weeks suddenly felt like the calm before a storm. The secret wasn't ours anymore. I felt the weight of Donald's words settle over us like a dark cloud. Someone saw us. The air in the room shifted. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the way he looked at me, like he was already preparing for the worst. My heart pounded against my ribs as I motioned for him to sit on the edge of my bed. "Who saw?" I asked, keeping my voice steady even though my mind was racing. He shook his head, his eyes wide with panic. I don't know. I didn't see them, but I felt. He paused, trying to catch his breath. I felt like someone was watching us. I couldn't help but feel my stomach drop. I'd seen that look on his face before, the kind of look that comes when something's about to break. Donald wasn't a man who easily lost his composure, but in that moment he was a shell of the confident, tough older brother I'd always known. Was it someone you knew? I asked, inching closer to him. The distance between us felt too wide, even if we were sitting in the same room. He shook his head again, more violently this time. I don't know. But I can't stop thinking about it. What if they tell Mom and Dad? What if they find out? His voice cracked, and I could see his hands trembling at his sides. Betty, I'm so scared. I reached over, my hand settling on his. It was strange how natural it felt to be the one holding him up. How, in some ways, our roles had switched. It's going to be okay, I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. We'll figure this out. But as the words left my mouth, I realized just how uncertain everything felt. The truth was, I had no idea what was going to happen. I had no idea how Mom and Dad would react if they found out. No idea how anyone would react. But I knew that whatever came next, Donald wasn't facing it alone. The silence between us stretched out for a moment before he spoke again, his voice quieter now. I never wanted anyone to know. I thought if I kept it hidden long enough, everything would just stay normal. But now, he trailed off, his voice faltering. I could feel the weight of that moment press down on me, press down on both of us. I squeezed his hand. Normal's overrated anyway. I smiled at him, trying to bring back the connection we'd shared before, but it was harder now. The tension was too thick. Still, he managed a small, almost grateful smile. Yeah, he muttered. Normal's a joke. We sat in silence for a long time after that, neither of us knowing what to say next. I could feel the pressure building inside me too. What if the secret was out? What if everything crashed down? What would happen to Donald? To me? To our family? And then, without warning, the front door opened. I heard Mom's voice calling out from downstairs. Donald? Betty? Are you up there? I froze, the blood draining from my face. Donald's eyes darted toward the door, and I could see him tense, ready to bolt. For a second, I thought he might try to slip out the window. But then something in me clicked. I wasn't just his sister anymore. I wasn't just his younger sibling who looked up to him. I was his ally, and no matter what came next, we would face it together. I stood up quickly, walking over to the door and pressing my ear against it, listening for any sign of what was coming. Then I turned back to Donald, my hand on the doorknob. We're going to do this, I said firmly, locking eyes with him. I won't let them hurt you. Not like this. He stared at me, as if trying to gauge whether I meant it. I could feel his uncertainty in the way he looked at me, this fragile trust, this moment of connection. His jaw tightened, and I could see the flicker of gratitude in his eyes. He was still afraid, still uncertain, but somehow he believed me. Okay, he said, his voice rough. Okay. With one last deep breath, I opened the door. Mom was standing in the hallway, her face unreadable. She was still holding the laundry basket in her arms. But there was something different in the way she stood, something that made me realize she had heard the tension between us. It was as if she knew something was off. Is everything okay? She asked, her tone light but with an undercurrent of concern. I glanced at Donald, who was standing just behind me. His face was pale, his hands twitching in his pockets. For a second, I thought he might back out. But then slowly he stepped forward. Mom, he said quietly, his voice unsteady. I need to talk to you. I could see Mom's expression change as she looked at him. Her brow furrowed slightly, but there was a softness to her gaze. A gentleness that made me think she wasn't going to jump to conclusions. Maybe she already suspected something. Maybe this was the moment she'd been waiting for, the moment Donald finally spoke up. Come sit down, Donald, she said, her voice calm. What's on your mind? For a second, Donald looked at me, his eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. I nodded at him, one tiny gesture to let him know he wasn't alone. Then, with a deep breath, Donald walked past me and sat down on the couch, facing Mom. His hands gripped the edges of the cushion, his knuckles white. He looked so young in that moment, so vulnerable, like the weight of the world was pressing down on him. I've been hiding something, he started, his voice wavering. Something I should have told you a long time ago. He stopped, swallowing hard. It was as if the words were too heavy, like they were lodged somewhere deep inside him, fighting to get out. I felt my heart race, and I knew that this moment would change everything. How it would change things, I wasn't sure, but it was a line we couldn't uncross. I'm gay, he said finally, the words coming out in a rush. And I've been afraid to tell you because I didn't think you'd understand. There was a long silence, my stomach twisted with anticipation. Would Mom yell? Would she turn away? Would she be disappointed? But instead, she looked at him, her eyes softening. Slowly, she set the laundry basket down, her hands resting on her lap. Is that all, sweetheart? She asked, her voice gentle. Is that what you've been hiding? Donald blinked, as if he hadn't expected her to respond like that. He nodded, his eyes searching hers, waiting for her reaction. Then, to my surprise, Mom leaned forward and pulled him into an embrace. I love you, Donald, she whispered. Nothing's going to change that. Nothing. I stood there frozen, watching the scene unfold in front of me. The knot in my chest loosened, but there was still so much left unsaid. Thank you, Donald whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. I was so scared. Mom pulled back slightly, cupping his face in her hands. You don't ever have to be scared with us, honey. We're your family, we'll always love you. And in that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't just Donald's secret anymore. It was ours. And as a family, we'd share the weight of it together. It wasn't perfect after that night. There were still hard conversations to have, still moments of awkwardness. But there was also something else, a quiet strength in the air between us, a bond that had been tested and found unbreakable. As for me and Donald, we grew closer in ways I never imagined. And every time he smiled, even when it was just a little, it felt like the world was finally starting to make sense again. Because the truth? It was never the secret that mattered most. It was the love and trust we shared, the kind of love that doesn't hide, that doesn't run away, no matter what. And with that, we both started to feel free.